Okay, so for the persuasive um, presentation, I have chose to talk about child custody. Um, I don't believe that when it comes to having children that it is an equal playing field between men and women. And I do have personal experience in this, and without going into too much detail, I will just say that I am a single parent of two boys, and I have raised them independently their entire lives. They are 18 and 10. So, the title is My Body, My Choice. When is it his turn to choose? My body, my choice. So, the topic alone is controversial, but that's not what this is about. If a woman chooses to get pregnant and have an abortion, the story ends there. If you get pregnant and you give birth, then that is where the story begins and the inequality comes into play. So I'm going to give you two scenarios. Scenario one, a man and a woman have a baby, and the man makes a decision that he doesn't want to be a parent. This isn't for him, doesn't fit into his lifestyle. He is on a different path than the woman. And so the woman supports that decision and decides to raise that child independently. Woman's going to have the child, has chosen to be a parent. Well, court takes place and decides that the father cannot give up their rights and will still be held financially responsible for that child. Scenario number two, a man and a woman get married. The woman gets pregnant and decides she's leaving the man. Woman then meets another man and wishes for the soon-to-be ex-husband not to be involved in the current child's life once it is born. The soon-to-be ex-husband must fight in court to see that child once it is born. I have first-hand witnessed both of these scenarios. I am the woman in scenario one, and I was the best friend of the woman in scenario two. Although it requires a man and a woman to conceive a child, once that child is born, women do continue to hold more power when it comes to being a parent than a man. I'd like to add a disclaimer. So for the sake of this presentation, I would like to imagine two average people, a man and a woman. The things discussed in this presentation do not apply to victims of abuse or in situations of abuse. Those situations are unique and they require different laws. And mainly, I'm going to discuss the difficulties when the mom and dad are not married. Because again, being married and going through custody is a completely different set of laws. So women hold the decision-making power when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth. We choose whether or not we're going to follow through with the pregnancy. And we do not require the input of the biological father. Hence, her body, her choice. Also, when a child is born, if I go in to have a child and I decide that I would like to give this child up for adoption, I don't want to be a parent, I do not have to take the biological father's wishes into account. That's not a requirement. We are not required to disclose who the biological father is or even notify him of the pregnancy or the birth. So how that works is that you go in, you have the baby, you decide, I don't want to do this, I'm going to give the baby up for adoption. And you don't even have to make that decision. You don't have to tell anybody. You can just leave the hospital and leave the baby at the hospital. You could drop the baby off at the fire station and walk away. It doesn't require the permission of anyone else. The court will publish a small article in a newspaper that will run usually in the county that the birth took place to alert of this possible adoption. But if a man is not aware that he had a child then there's no guarantee that it would even alert him. There is a registry that the Missouri Department of Social Services has where men can register if they believe that this may happen. If they believe that there's the possibility of a child, then, a man can register his information there in hopes that he will be contacted. So once that is over, once I've decided I'm not going to have an abortion, I'm not going to give the baby up for adoption, and the child is born, that's when the fight for the dad really takes place. They'll need to obtain a lawyer, prove paternity, and go to court for visitations. And again, this is more common when not married. So 79.9% of custodial parents in the U.S. are mothers. Fathers are granted custody only about 18% of the time. And when they are granted custody, they receive less child support on average than mothers. They also must then request to be placed on the birth certificate because, again, women are not required to list the birth father on the birth certificate. When calculating child support, it also does not take into account other children or individuals within the home that the non-custodial parent resides. So what happens when a man decides that he doesn't want to be present? He doesn't want to actually be a father. So they can't just go in and say, I'm not going to do this and walk away. They can still be held financially responsible. Child support would still be ordered, and there would still be consequences for not paying that child support. It varies by state, but they face consequences like having their driver's license revoked or having wages garnished. They can also still be held responsible to carry health insurance, which is kind of a crazy scenario if you think about it, because again, a woman can give birth and drop the child off at the fire station and walk away, and that's okay. But a man cannot make the choice to not be a parent and not still be held responsible for that child, or to not be labeled by society as a deadbeat, which you often hear. And sometimes a man really does make the decision to not be a part of that child's life because it is in the benefit of that child. But that is not what society thinks about. So although most of the states in the U.S. have advanced throughout the years to be fair in custody cases, there are still things the biological father cannot do that the mom can. The father does not get to choose if the child is even born to begin with, regardless if they want it. They also do not get to be notified of the pregnancy or the birth. Society tends to favor the mother and require the father to prove himself fit. Women are more often viewed as the caretakers and the nurturers, but times do change. I'm not saying that we should make women carry a child to term if she's not wanting to, but I do believe that we should award the right to abort parental rights without consequence or continued financial responsibility for men. I also believe child support needs to be reevaluated as we live in a time where we want to be equals. Some people choose to work less or stay home, and in that case, another person should not have to financially provide support to another household just because they share a child. Being a parent is a choice. It's a choice that you make. Equal opportunity as well as equal rights should include both genders.